for everybody to join this presentation. So today's topic is ZK MVC for beginners. So I assume there are some newcomers today. So at first I will still give you some brief introduction about ZK to let you know an overview, what is ZK and why you should use ZK. And the second, I will show you a very simple example application to demonstrate how to develop a web application with ZK in MVC pattern. Since ZK supports two patterns, MVC and MVVM, but today we'll focus on MVC, and later we will go into the detail about how to implement this this example application. And later we'll give you a short comparison about MVC and MVVM and let you ask any questions. Okay. First, let's start to give you some brief introduction about ZK. So I'll use this slide. Okay. And this is the outline. I will not talk all of this, but I will quickly give you a overview. So first, what is ZK? ZK is a UI framework which is based on Java and based on Java EE. And so ZK provides XML format language to let you build the UI. And so we call it ZUL. That's ZK User Interface Language. And but you still can build your UI with pure Java, like a swing. You can new a button, new a window, and add a button under the window. It's also supported. And it allows fast prototyping. You can write Java code in the ZUL page so that you can quickly build a prototype for your user to discover his real requirement. And we support two development patterns. One is MVC, one is MVVM. And we also support IDE like Eclipse and IntelliJ. We have two plugins. One is ZK Studio for Eclipse, and there's a ZK plugin for IntelliJ. And we support lots of components with beautiful design. And we also support the ZUL page generates the HTML is XHTML compatible. And what is not ZK? ZK doesn't assume that you use any, doesn't limit you to use any persistent framework like Hibernate or JPA or any database. It doesn't limit. You can use anything you want. And it's also not a business logic layer or middle layer framework like Spring. So you can use anything you want like Spring. And it just plays just like a controller, very thin layer. So we just tell us about ELs. Okay, later I will tell you more about it. So the ZK won't force you to extend a lot of class or interface. So you just need to, when you want to control a component, you need to create a controller, something like this. And it doesn't just only the control layer, you need to use ZK API. And others layer like service layer, persistent, you can use anything else. So you can use ZUL. You can also use Java to build your user interface. And it doesn't limit in browser. You can use any browser like Firefox, Chrome, Edge, or even mobile browser. So why do you use ZK? Previously, if you want to build a web application, it's page-based UI. For example, if you use JSP, when you fire an HTTP request to a server, it gives you the whole page in his response. So a user is blocked by waiting for a blank page, he will see a blank page and waiting for server's response. Because every time the server has to send the whole page, so there is more inefficient, and there are more data to send. You need to wait for a long time. Later, then Google started to use Ajax. Ajax means asynchronous JavaScript and XML. So it's a combination of different um, technology like about browsers building XML HTTP requests. So you can fire a synchronous HTTP request without blocking users, and a server will give you some data, and then in the client side we implement some JavaScript code to update the partial page without reloading the whole page. So, and after since ZK 8.5, the WebSocket is also supported. So the benefit is that we can such architectures we use Ajax, we can reduce the response time because you don't need to wait for whole page to download, and we can reduce the network traffic because you just need to transfer some necessary data, and you can because the response time and network traffic is reduced, you can bring user a better user experience. But using Ajax have heavy costs and problems. If you want to implement by yourself, for example, you need to write some JavaScript, and you need to write you need to know the browser, uh, need to handle the communication with server and client. It's complicated. So you need to know more CSS, browser, HTML knowledge. So for Java E vacation or for Java E engineer, this requires more things, more skills. And if you try to implement with JavaScript, sometimes you usually tend to implement some business logic at the client side. So there's a danger to expose your business logic at the client side. And there's also a maintenance problem because your code consists of some JavaScript code and some Java code, and they're coupling together. So this is the traditional way if you want to implement everything by yourself. Then the ZK is created to solve the above problems. So if with ZK you can build a UI with Java components, and each components can communicate with the server with Ajax. So your application just write in Java, and you call this Java components. You call this Java components. This what you want, and the Java component will communicate with the client side by automatically. You don't need to control in detail. So these component will synchronize to client-side partner together. So there's also ZK client-side engine, and client-side widgets is generated by ZK, and the component and widgets will cooperate together to achieve some UI updating. So, but we still leave the space to customize in ZK. That's why we call server-client fusion here. That means you can control with Java, but if it's necessary, you still can override some JavaScript widgets, or you can do some customization. In underlying, we rely on JavaScript library. Rely on jQuery JavaScript library. And the benefits is first is high productivity because you can focus on your business. You don't need to worry about the client rendering, the client server communication detail. Just focus on your business logic. So, and you don't need to handle this communication detail by yourself. You can control your user interface in Java. You don't need to, it's easy since you just need to create a Java controller. So it's easy to integrate with other backend service and easy to maintain because Java is a strong type language. So it's easy to find a problem, and compiler will help a lot. And the secure means that your business only exists at a server side. So even a user with a browser, even when he opens the develop tool, he doesn't know any business logic because at client side just rendering logic. Okay, everything is checked at the server side. And but UI framework is not just a pure technical artifact. It's an artifact from software engineer and designer. So It contains some UI design wisdoms and good practice. Your system UI can instantly benefit by using ZK framework. So you don't need to worry about how to render your data in a pretty way, which color you should choose, how large is the padding margin or font size, because our component is also crafted by a designer. So you can see there are lots of color combination you can choose, so that you can spend more time on your core problem, which is your business logic, and leave those UI problems for us. And ZK also was created since 2006, so now it become a mature framework with various features. So there are lots of customers and use cases. We have expert level support team who can help you on special case. And we also support ZK provide more than 150 components. So you don't need to start from scratch. You can just use these reusable component and immediately get their features like plain Lego blocks. But because every application has some common needs, so we have provided these components. You can see on calendar, some input components, some display component, or some navigation components. So you don't need to build from nothing. Every component is configurable to fit a different use case. Okay, so it's configurable, reusable component can largely reduce the time to build a page and increase your productivity. And so each component is implemented in ZK is implemented by a Java class. So first, you can even extend a Java component class, Java class or a JavaScript widget to create a new component, to create some customization behavior. Or you can combine multiple components to create a new component like Lego. Or we also have a template injection. You can inject a fragment of view to reuse it. So you don't need to copy and paste. And ZK also conform to the Java EE standard. You can use servlet spec from 2.4 to 3.1. And this Java ZK framework is based on two servlets. So you can see all the main setting is you need to set up these two servlets. One is layout servlet, update servlet. So it's based on standard technology. We don't create any new things, new spec. So you can run ZK with any Java EE standard application server. And so we, based on this, the ZUL concept actually comes from the Mozilla XUL. Each tag represents a component, not an HTML tag. And underline, we use jQuery libraries. We also rely on CSS3 to build our components appearance. From application perspective, you can see this is what you need to implement. You need to create a composer or controller. It could be composer or view mode, depending on what pattern you use. So today we'll focus on composer, and there might be a business class, persistent class, or database. And ZK provide this component and widgets, and they will communicate and synchronize to each other. Okay, so every request, when browser requests to Azure, they will translate into Java object and response as a JavaScript widget in your browser. So in a component perspective, it's one component here. There is a Java component, Java object at a server side, and there's a JavaScript at the client side, and it will render DOM elements for you, and there's also CSS applied on it. So that's how a ZK component is composed by these parts. And we support to allow you to write Java code inside Azure. You can see this is the XML format. So this is how Azure looks like. You can write Java code here, and you can easily to add some simple logic at this rule without creating a real Java class. to make this can allow you to create a quick prototyping for you to let user know what their page looks like. This page we call prototyping is very useful because most users don't know what they want until they see a real page. Okay, later we'll revisit this page. So there's later we will compare with this. And so we also have support lots of different themes. If you purchase an extra theme pack, there are extra 23 themes. You can see there are lots of different combinations. So the first thing, the default theme is ice blue, which is uh, default theme. If you run ZK, you will see with this version you can see this theme. But other things you need to purchase separately. And we also have some testing tool. You can run ZK online with your browser only. And we have automation testing tool we call ZATS. You can test ZK without server and the browser. And ZK can be easily integrated with other framework. So you can see just play it as a view and the controller. So we can easily integrate with other like Spring or other Hibernate frameworks or other servers. So in ZK, we strongly recommend you to use Maven to manage your projects. You can avoid some version conflict and to avoid hunting jars. So in ZK, you can also create ZK project with an archetype. You can check our document. And if you want to use ZK, there are 3 core dependencies you need to enclose one of it. If you use ZK, you just need to enclose ZK Max. If you use ZK PE, you need to include ZK EX. If you use CE, which is free, you need to include ZUL. And there are 3 option artifacts. It depends on which one you want to use. You don't have to include it. Like if you want to use shell element, XHTML components, or some framework integrations. Okay, so it depends. Okay, so we recommend you to use Maven. Okay, then next. Then this is the brief introduction. And next I will demonstrate you the example application. The example application is here. It's a search, a car search application. So this function is very simple. We just type some keyword, for example, Nissan. Press click button, you will show those cars with Nissan. And when I click one of the car, it will show some detail for me. Okay, so that's the simple example application. It's very simple. If you type nothing, they will show all cars. Okay, so just 2 functions. So now we start to see how to build this simple application with ZK. Okay. First, we see we built the user interface with ZUL. This is how ZUL looks like. It's an XML format language. So every tag you can see represent a components. So there are 3 parts in this page. First is the search. The outer is a window. We make it like a desktop application, so we use a window as this friend. And the first part is the search part. It's a keyword, text box, and search as input. And there's a car list here. This is a list box, and this is a detail. It's a car detail. So there are 3 areas in this page. And so usually the first step we build a your application is to build its UI, and it's very easy. Just write some XML format languages. So every tag represents a component. So we can check our component reference to see which component fits your use case. And there are attributes. You can see every component has different attributes. If you um, if you install ZK plugin in IntelliJ, it will have some content assist for you. You can choose attributes from this list without typing by yourself. So the titles, the attribute represent its function, its feature. So you can configure a component by specify its attribute. So this title will you specify title with title attribute defined. Control is width by width attribute, control is border, and then you can write some div and with a text box, which is the input box. You can type text, and there's a button, and there's a list box. Is a card list. The list box can allot to show a collection of objects. And so you need to define columns we call list headers. So there are 3 columns here. You can also specify width. And to render the collection of object, the collection of card, we need to define a template. And the template need to be named by model. In this template, we defined how one item looks like. So to render one item, maybe here is one card. We use each is the reserved keyword, means that each object in our collection of objects. In this case, it's called car. So that represent a car object, and car object has a model, has a make, has a price. So we use EO expression here. This we call EO expression. It's an expression language. It's the same expression language you use in JSP. So it starts with $sign and the curly brace. And here, so you use each make and each model to reference property. So you can assume that there in car there must be a getter. We call get model and get make and get price. So that's how you can render your collection object into these list items. So and then there's a detail area. The detail is composed by H layout and V layout. That means horizontal layout. You will arrange your component in a horizontal way. So you can see there's a image on the left and labels on the right. So in our page, you can see image on the left and labels on the right. That means you arrange these components in a horizontal way. And the vertical layout, which is V layout here, means it arrange component in a vertical way. So there's a model, make, price, and description. They are arranged in vertical order. So here, model, make, price, and detail descriptions. This is how you can control the layout by ZK component. Okay, so these the first step, we build our user interface with ZUL. If you just write here like this, for example, there's a case we just write. It's just build a page with the ZUL and without any logic on it. Then it will look like this. This is the empty page. You can see this is this dummy page. So usually you can build a static page and present to users, say, oh, this is the final, roughly the target page, or you can add some dummy data to user, make feel like it's a real page, but actually it's just an empty or static page, but user can see the target result. Okay, then the next step is to implement UI logic, because this kind of page is static. It doesn't respond to any user action. It just it doesn't have any data. It doesn't respond to what I click or what I type. So it's just a static page. but it has all the ZK's look and feel. So the next we have to implement a controller because now we use an MVC architecture. So let's revisit our slides. Let's check the MVC architecture here. In MVC architecture, there's a view, and the view, which is the Azure page. And you need to implement a controller, which is a Java class, and you will listen events and implement some business logic, and then you will update UI. So this is what you implement, and this is model. The model usually means there is your backends, might be a class to access database or some business logic. So your controller usually will call this business layer to perform some business logic like authentication or search or get data. So when user click a button, the event will fire through the Ajax request to the controller, and you need to register event listener in the controller, and you will invoke your pre-registered event controller here. And the event controller, the event listener will contain some business logic, and this business logic is implemented by calling your model class or service class, and you will return some data, and you will publish those data through calling ZK's component API. Then ZK will generate proper HTTP response to the client side, and the client side will update itself because there's a client-side engines, ZK client-side engine. Okay, so this is how the ZK MVC architecture. And so first step is we need to implement a controller. Here is the controller. You can see you need to create a class with a controller, and it should extend one of ZK's built-in composer. Here we recommend you selector composer, which means it can get your components with selector syntax. Okay, now we use the default selector, which means these keywords, these are components I want to control in our controller. And you can see this type is ZUL text box. So every component I want to control, I need to declare it inside my controller, like text box, this box, label, image. And I don't need to use new statement to create these components by myself. I just need to specify, apply an annotation called while. Okay, first, when the reason is why I can explain now. So this, if I create a controller, I need to link it with a Azure page. And this is how we link. We applied it on the root component, on those component I want to control on this root component. So here the window is the root component. You use apply to specify the full qualified class name, and so I can control all children components under window, including window itself. So that's how I link a controller with page. So when user and a browser visit this page, search MVC, and ZK will parse this ZUL page, and he will see this class. So he will create a new object. He will instantiate a new object of search controller. So you don't need to instantiate by yourself. ZK will instantiate for you. And then he will check this annotation to search if there is a keyword box ID. So you can search, there's a keyword box, is ID matched? So by default, if you applied a while annotation, he will search the keyword, search this variable name that match the ID, the component's ID here. If there's a match, then ZK will, because when ZK parsing this Azure page, we will translate each tag into a Java object. So there's a text box, you will translate a new a text box object, a Java object. And so after he create these objects, he will search this oh, there's a wire, and he will inject those newly created Java object text box into this variable. So you don't see any new statement in this code. That means I don't need to type here like text box. I don't need to new a text box by myself. There's no need, because the ZK framework will new the component for me and inject into this controller for me. Only I need to specify, I need to apply a while um, annotation here. Also, there are other syntax you can wire anything, like with other selector, like I can wire a button, my text box, something like this. But here now to keep it simple, we just use the default wiring rules, convention rule with the variable name match the component's ID. So you will treat this variable name as component ID. So every one is like this. You can see there's a car list box, and so my list box I must specify its ID as car list box. So that ZK will find the matched component. Surely the type also need to match. So here, after I run I visit this page, the ZK will instantiate these components for me. Okay. So, and now after controller is ready, I need to add some event listeners. So when I click a search button, I need to perform a search logic. So I create a method here, search, and I implement my business logic. For example, I want to know what user type, what kind of keyword he type. I just call get value. And this is a data model. The data model is the model that store a list of cards. We suggest you to use list model list. This is a ZK collection object instead of using Java standard linked list, because we optimize the rendering performance. So it's better to use this. If you want to assign a data model, a collection of object to a component like list box, we suggest you to use ZK built-in object. So here because this is a search, so I will clear the data model, and then I will add the search result. What is the search result? Is car service. The car services represent your backend service. You will access your database to search the matched car for me. Okay, so when I call this method with keywords, it will search those matched car as a collection object and return to me. And I just add it all into our data model. So, and when I call this method, you will also notify the list marks and render those newly searched cars into your browser. So how to listen to, so this is how you can implement a business logic with ZK. But how to make this method being called by the button click, that I need to add this annotation with listen, and that means event and search button. The shove sign means the ID search button. So when this expression means when search button is clicked, then you will invoke this method. So here you can see we have an ID, we have a button whose ID is search button. So this search button ID must match this. Okay, there's a shove sign, means it's a ID selector. So you will select a component with whose ID is search button. And in its onClick event, it will invoke this method. So this is how you can register event listener. You can wire, we call wire, to bind these two things together, to wire this method with the button. And we can also wire multiple event. For example, OK events happen on window. OK means when I press a button, enter button. Okay, so when I press the enter key, so you can see I don't need to click the button to click the search button. I just need press the enter key, then we'll fire an OK event to its root or parents, and you will perform the search method. Okay, so I can register 2 events on the same event listener. So this is the same how we implement select car. So when we select a car, it will show its details. So how do we implement this? Is we also register on select event on car list box. So when I click the list box, when I click the list item in the list box, you will fire on select event, and it will invoke this show detail method for me. So how do I implement this show detail? First, I need to get the selection. I can get the selection by calling data models get selection. So it will give me a set of car, and I just iterate to find the first car. Actually, there's only one car. This is a selected car. And the car is the entity being this I define for this application. So it could be, in your use case, it could be a person, can be an employee, or can be a record or item, anything. So it's not important, just represent a kind of a data. So I get this kind of data. This is the pure data, it's not a ZK class. So I need to publish these card details to my components. First, I need to publish this image, so I get preview. Its preview actually is a an image pass to a car image pass. So here is how I publish data is by calling setters. You can see I always call set attribute like set src, set view, set values. So I called set src to and field with cars detail. I call as the set value and pass with get model. So these are pure data. So I can call these setters to publish those data to the client side. Actually, the detail workflow is I call this to a component, and component will synchronize, respond to the client side. So this is how we implement UI logic in a controller. Okay. So and there's also some lifecycle method like do after compose. The do after compose is every child component is created that you will call this. So, and in here, we usually do some initializing logic here, like the list box is a container, but if you don't assign any data model to it, it just render nothing. So you have to set model with my data model here. Okay, the data model here. The data model contains a list of car. So when I set the model, then this model is bind to car list box. So when I call clear or when I call these models API like clear, like add or remove, you will send the event to notify this box, and this box will update the differential part to the client side. To render to it. That's why I recommend you to use ZK list model list, because ZK class optimize the rendering performance. So you will let this box to know you add one car, then you just render one car. You remove one car, and just remove one. It doesn't. If you use Java standard collection objects, you will just re-render whole things, the whole collection. Okay. So it takes longer time. Okay, next we just do a very short, quick comparison between the MVC and MVVM, because in MVC MVVM you can see you cannot what you create is different. It's a view models. It's not a composer. So you don't. But the good thing is the view model doesn't have to extend any ZK parent class, but but you need to write some data binding expressions inside the Zool page. So how do you control in MVVM pattern is it's a bit indirectly. You the view model doesn't contain any object reference, so you cannot call an object an components API to control the view. So you need to declare some data and setter and getter inside here and write some data binding expression to bind components and the data here, or bind some methods into event here. And inside between this, there's a ZK framework will do some automatic synchronization between the view model and view. That's the main difference. So the strengths of each patterns, basically it can achieve almost the same thing, but it depends on your preference. In MVC, its main idea is to control user interface by calling API, control component API directly. So it's intuitive and easy to learn, because what the logic of your page is easy to understand. You just see which API you call, you can easily to understand and easy to learn, because just like writing some normal Java, so it's easy to understand. And if you want to fine-grain control view components and control, that we suggest you use MVC, because the view just doesn't contain any logic. All the logic just in your controller, and you can call any component API to control a component. You can remove it, can destroy. You can even create a new component by new statement and add it to a page. So it can be very dynamically. So we say MVC. But in MVVM, its idea is to control UI by data binding. So it's a bit limited by the data binding expressions. But the benefits, the view model is very loosely coupled with view. The view model is also play as a controller. It's play the same role as composer in MVC. So you can see just this word is different, and MV is the same. So the VM means view model. So you can test the view model independently, because it doesn't extend any ZK parent class. So it has better reusability, and it's good for responsive design, because the view model doesn't know any component reference at your Zoo page. So if you change to another component but still use the same data, you can bind it to the same property in view model. So and in response design, we usually have two or multiple templates, but display the same data from view model. So you usually don't, when UI change, you don't need to change your view model's code. So it also has a testability for view model, because you can even unit test for it. You can new a view model for yourself. It's just a plain old Java object. Okay, but the problem is you need to know more about ZK framework does for you, because the data binding is running by ZK. So it will bind data automatically inside the framework. So you need to know how data binding work, so you can implement your application correctly. Okay, so this is the last things I will tell you. And so the last so now we have a Q&A sections. Do you have any question? Let me see if anyone already typed some question in the chat. Someone is asking about EL and Zuo components. I'm not sure what kind of EL you want to know, but you can check some basic information in our document. EL is EL expression here. You can specify EL in any components attributes, like this, for example, title X. But it will be, ZK will only evaluate these EL expressions once when he creates this page. So it just evaluate once, and it never change unless you refresh. So you cannot expect that when you click a button and this value will change by EL, so it doesn't. You can call set value to change the text box value, but the EL doesn't change. So this is the basic behavior of EL. So there's another question about ZKC is compatible with OpenJDK. If so, which version? I don't see anything about it. Yes, because OpenJDK doesn't. We didn't find any for ZK. I mean, there is a difference, but actually we don't find any difference between OpenJDK. At least for ZK, ZK can run correctly in OpenJDK or Oracle JDKs. You can use every day we test, we run it on OpenJDK. It doesn't produce any errors. So I think in ZK latest version you can use both OpenJDK or even older version. I don't see any problem when running with OpenJDK. Okay. So the name of the template to render component in Drupal is always model. Yes, it's a default. So you can see here, if you can declare a template in a page, but it's not for example, I can declare a template, for example, called test, but this template will not be used by the Dixbox. So if you want to declare a template that used to render model for Listbox or any other component that supports model attribute. So you must name this template as model. This is to tell the Listbox say, okay, this is the template you need to use to render this collection of your data model. Okay, so this must be, but in another case, for example, you want to declare a template and want to maybe the template contains other things, like maybe contain a button you want to reuse. This is what we call template injections. And you don't need to name your template with model. You can use any name you like. So you can use a template test, something like this. Okay, so you can, in this case, you can use any name you like. What is the use of hreflex and how many types we have in ZK to UDE use the same? Oh, okay. The hreflex and vflex is also a topic need some time. So you can check our document about this. Hreflex and vflex. I just quickly mention several points. It means that horizontal flexibility or vertical flexibility, because sometimes we don't want to specify a fixed size of a component because we don't know its fixed size. What is the proper fixed size? Or we want some proportional fixed size. For example, I want the daybox here, and I want these yellow div to consume all the rest of the page, but I don't know how big is the rest of the page, because every screen, every page, its size is different. So I cannot specify a fixed height like 200 pixel or 800 pixels. So I don't know. So I need to use the vflex one. The one means the proportion. So if there are two, so it will consume all the rest, consume the available space because there are only one. But if you want some proportional flexibility like this, there's a blue one and yellow one, and I want blue box to be 1/3, and the yellow box the yellow box must be 2/3. So I specify 1 and 2. So this 1/3 and 2/3. If I want them to be 50% each, so I can specify 1, 1, or I can specify 2, 2. That means they are equally, they have equally proportion. So you can specify any number, but they are sum and calculate in the same sibling, in the same level. So if there are 3 div here, and you want each one has equal proportion, so you can specify vflex 1, 1, 1. So there will be every box will have a height 33% height. Okay, so this is, but its height, its proportion is proportional to its parents. Okay, so this here is 50 pixels. So if I specify 1 and 1, then each one is 25 pixel. If its height is 200 pixel, and if I specify 1 and 1, vflex 1, vflex 1, and each one is 100 pixel. Okay, so this is a bit complicated, but it's best I would suggest you to read this document to know how to use it. This question is, what function has template in Zoo, and does it name place as a reference? In this case, in this box case, this template just serves as a template to render its data model. So you can see the template it contains list item because I want to render a collection of this box. And if you don't want this template, you can also type list box directly with static data, like this one. So something like this. You can also type list without template. But here we use a data model in this case. So we need a way to render we don't type each data in like this in the static text. So we need a template to render each object. So that's why we need to use model, give it name model. But in this case, the template serves as a reusable view fragment. So you can type any component inside. Maybe there's a label like username. So maybe this is what we call a username box. So this is username box. So, and I want to reuse this name because this frequently appeared patterns. So I want to reuse this part. So I can create a pattern, a reusable view fragment inside a template. So I can inject into any place of this page. So I can apply it, maybe apply in the end of this called username box. Okay. Oh, because I need to inject. If you want to use some this kind of applied, you need to specify. That's why I say I need to specify ZUTI is a ZK user inject UI injection. So because in this tutorial project I don't include the artifact, so I cannot use. But you can use it in your project. Okay. And so the template is a reusable view fragment to eliminate copy and paste. So if there are frequently appeared view fragment in your page, you can just make it as a template inject in your page. Or you can make it a separate URL. You can apply like this, a template, and can username box then Zoo. So, and put this template this into an independent rule. Okay, how can I programmatically control the browser? The closing of the browser is not allowed in JavaScript. So there's no such a you can, because it's a security issue. So maybe sometimes you can close in Chrome, but actually it could be just a bug. So now you cannot control by Java. You only can when user click. It just on the normally the browser only allow user to close a tab by himself. You cannot close a browser by JavaScript. How have you used to control search input using enter button instead of using search button? Okay, if you want to implement something like this, okay, there's when I press the enter key, you will search, and there are two ways to search. One is to press the search key. One is to press the enter key. So if you want to do this, you need to listen to OK. Sorry, there are some network connection problems, so I lost for a few seconds. And so the next question is about, I lost some chat. So if there are some question I don't answer because the time is almost done, I think that I can answer the last question. Okay, so if you want to implement on OK event, when you press the enter key to invoke a search, then you need to listen to on OK event on window. And so you can see this message will be invoked by two events. First event is click on search button. Second event is on OK on the window. So they will both invoke the search. Okay. So what is the, sorry, I think I didn't share the screen. So let me repeat again. There are two events will invoke these methods. One is the search button's click, and one is on OK on window. And OK is fired when I press the enter key of the text box, and it will fire on enter on OK event to its root component. So you can listen it and search and invoke the search method. Okay, so please tell me if there are any questions there because I lost the chat history. If there any question I haven't answered. Can template in the car list be reused in somewhere else in any list box? No. If you specify here, you cannot reuse it. So you must specify again because this is templates dedicated for this card. It's possible to mix MVC and MVVM in the same project. Yes, you can use both patterns in the same project, but we don't suggest to mix in the same scope. I mean, in this scope, in this window, I already use applier controller. So it's not suggest to use, for example, here, I just use a view model here. It totally work. I mean, I didn't mean it doesn't work. It will work, but usually it will make more confused because they are run in different life cycles. So sometimes you will produce unexpected result, and it's hard to debug. And so I would suggest you maybe just one block. It's better to one pattern in one page. But if you can't, or at least you don't mix two patterns in the same scope. For example, this window, you inside this window, don't use MVVM at the same time. You can declare another window here, and this window maybe use MVVM, and that's okay, and make things simple, because you mix two patterns will make things more complicated. Although you will work unless you are very familiar with the ZK, and but basically in general case we don't suggest to mix them, but you can use them in the same project. What are the feature implementation we can expect future? What kind of future implementation? I'm not sure what kind of feature you expect. If you can say, you can tell me what kind of feature you expect. Maybe I can answer. Can a template contain a list header and the list item as generated by the model being used in analysis box? You can find the model being used in analytics box. Oh. Yes, I think you can access the record later. Can I have several templates? Template models in different components to render different list model in the same rule. Yes, you can. Oh. Okay. But you can use the shadow elements to use like if, for example, you can use there's a shadow element, just check shadow elements document. For example, if test, usually we use it in data binding. So like this. Is there any ZK component like ZK editor? Yes, just I don't know, just ZK editor. I mean, there's no similar component like ZK editor. The single ZK editor is it's a rich editor. This is the only rich editor we have. So I think there's no. You can do something similar, just for example, make text box multi-line, but I think it's, oh, there's one case, there's one similar editors that we call TB editors. It's more lightweight, but it's similar to CKEdit, but it's more lightweight, has less features. So CKEdit has more features, and TB editor is less features. And there's a text box, ZK text box is almost even less. But you can also make a text box multi-line to enter multi-line looks like editor. Okay. So ZK chart can be used with ZKC. Yes, you can. Okay. So to load image, which is better, TB editor or CK editor? I think CK editor is better to load the image, because but I'm not sure there. I don't think there's a much different when loading an image in TB editor or CK editor. I think it's almost the same, just insert image. So I don't know which one. You can choose what you preferred, but I think there's no much different. Is a license required to use ZK-char with CE? ZK-char, yes, ZK-char has a license. You need to require a license. It's not a free. It's not free, and ZKC is free, but ZK-char is not. You need to purchase a commercial license. Okay, I think the time is up. So thanks everyone for joining this training. We'll see you next time. please to stay tuned on and note our to follow us on our website. Okay, thank you everyone. Bye bye.